That's private property. It was all that else read through.
And that's for the, this one,
Oh, I see what I heard you say she's
For the-
showing us. Okay.
for the fire station.
So, and the thing that we switch.
Not good for me.
Okay, well, if he's not here, so you're saying if he's not here when we get started, switch these around?
Yeah, because
Okay.
she's, yeah.
Okay.
And Frank, you're ready.
Ready?
Yes.
Ready.
All right, well, good evening. Welcome to the October 15th, 2019 meeting of the Yellow Springs Planning Commission. I'm Frank, and would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Snowden,
Here.
Stiles.
Here.
Krieger,
Present.
Williams.
Here.
Palata.
Here.
Also present, Village Planner Denise Swinger and Solicitor Chris Connard.
Just going over the agenda, just going to review, we'll have a review of the minutes. We'll talk about a couple of communications that we got. Will you have a council report for us tonight?
Trying to think if I do. I don't, let me think about
We'll
that.
let you think
Lisa,
about it.
in response to that, perhaps part of your council report might have been about the active transportation plan, which the village manager is here to address. So,
Oh, yeah, I could definitely talk about that.
Okay. Then we have a couple of, number of public hearings, one on the new fire station, one on a conditional use application for 1315 Corey Street, and then a number of potential amendments to Yellow Springs Code. And then that's pretty much it, a little agenda planning at the end. So, that's what we'll be doing. After the council report, we'll also have a period for citizen comments, and that's for anybody who wants to talk about anything that's not on the agenda. So, okay. All right, let's review the minutes, please. The first set of minutes that we have are for the regular meeting, which was on Tuesday, September 10th, 2019. Does anybody have any corrections or changes to page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6? Or page 7? Anybody want to make a motion?
I move approval of the minutes of the September 10th regular meeting.
Second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. September 10th, 2019 minutes have been approved. The next set of minutes that we have are for the special work session that we had regarding the senior housing building. That was on Tuesday, September 17th, 2019. Are any corrections or clarifications to page 1? I had a couple of things. Under just a few lines below work session, it says Doden received confirmation that the peak of the roof was now XX feet shorter. Should be something in there for XX.
really, you think, yes, I will follow up on that.
And then a couple of lines below that, I think it should be changed to the request instead of changed equal sign, or it should be asked what the change is. It should be changes, not changed
Gotcha.
equal
Yep.
sign, yes. Anything else anybody has on page 1?
Yeah, I've got a couple additionals that I was looking at too.
Okay.
It's not listed on there. I think when we asked them what the winning bid was, I think they told us it was $194,000 per unit. We have to go back to the notes and look at that. And I think that we asked them what their bid was at, and I don't recall. I know it was 200 something. We need to go to the notes to see what it was. I just want to put that in there. I think also they said there was no generator. They weren't going to put any generator on
That
it.
is correct, yes, and I'll check as to where that fell. You think it was in that same?
Oh, yeah, that actually, the generator is actually covered near the bottom of page 2.
Was it?
Yeah, just one line. Burns was asked whether the building will have a generator backup and was told no. Is that what you're talking about?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
What else we have?
Anything else on page 1, 2, or 3, since these are kind of short, that anybody noticed? Okay. I move that we approve the minutes from the work session from Tuesday, September 17th, 2019.
I seconded.
All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye.
I think I abstain, is that what I do, or if, because I didn't watch the
You can
video?
abstain.
Yeah, I was there.
The proper procedure is, in that scenario, to adopt the minutes rather than approve the minutes.
I see.
So you can vote to adopt the minutes in your capacity because the minutes reflect the actions of the body, and that doesn't require your personal knowledge.
Thank you.
Or you can pass it 4 to.
All right. Are we adopting or
Yeah,
approving?
4 to an
Well, the motion was to approve.
I abstain.
Okay. So, do we need a voice vote then to make sure that we have at least? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, would you call the roll then? For all those who are in favor, say
You
aye.
can just go ahead and IFI it. Yep.
Okay, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
One abstention.
That's a
Thank you
new
very
word, IFI.
All right. The minutes, we had a couple of communications. We had a letter in your packet, email from Doris Hupschman, if I pronounced the name correctly, regarding the 1315 Corey Street. Concerns about that?
I have a question about, where does she live? And is she one of the neighbors?
She is a neighbor,
Okay,
yes.
because she didn't list her address. Across the street?
Yes, she would be what would be classified as an adjacent or budding neighbor. She's across
Okay.
the street.
And then does the letter regarding the EPA public information hearing, does that count as communications?
It does. Mary Ann McQueen had wanted that passed along to all of the planning commission so that you would consider yourselves invited to that meeting.
Okay, and that'll be a meeting that is on October 24th, which is that a Thursday? Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
From 5 to 7 p.m. in rooms A and B at the John Bryan Center regarding the Vernay property, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Opportunity for you to get the most up-to-date information about Vernay's final draft corrective measures, proposals, and the EPA's process for responding. So that meeting will be on the 24th from 5 to 7 p.m. and just down the hall here, room A and B.
That's the night.
Candidate forum,
Okay, that's
yes.
candidate
And,
forum, too.
yeah,
Okay.
we did not,
All right.
yes, have control.
So we apologize for the scheduling on this being the same night as the candidate night, but we've had some scheduling conflict. We're working at on the timeline of the EPA, and we wanted to do this as soon as possible so that we don't delay the information being released to the general public and allow for folks to reflect on it and be able to meet the comment period in early 2020, which begs
What
the
time is
question.
the candidate forum?
7 to 9.
Okay, thank you. All right. Council report.
Sure, I can definitely share what happened at council with the active transportation plan. There continue to be a lot of citizen comments about the plan, about this plan of rerouting. I would say what really stood out for me was an argument that maybe the problem that was trying to be solved was the school drop-off, and that, maybe a simpler approach could be taken that really focused more intently on the school drop-off problem. And there were some different ideas about how that might be solved, but several people were expressing that this might be more change than is necessary, if that's really the root problem. Also, the importance of getting sufficient input from key affected businesses, from the school, and also from the police department was important, and people were asking for evidence that that input had been obtained, and that asking for those individuals to affirm that from their perspective it was sufficient. There was also questions about who is going to monitor and perform an ongoing traffic study while the change was in place, and sort of, who and when and how much monitoring. And that was an area of concern, and I don't feel like there was a real quantitative response given to that question. It was just sort of like, well, there would be some, but I don't think that we were able to say, oh, it would be during these hours or this much a day. I guess another concern, just going back to that, and that I've now heard from citizens subsequent to the meeting, is the risk that that rerouting is going to push traffic into the neighborhoods. And so, to me, that's implicated in the question about monitoring, because where should the monitoring happen? Is it just right there in that route, or how far out of that center group would you have to really get some insights to understand what the total impact of that change in traffic flow is? So I did just hear today that both the US Bank and the hardware store are going to have some very informal little surveys for people to fill out and just put in a box. The bank took the initiative to do that, so that would be some source of data. What am I forgetting? Is there more that you'd like to add, Josue?
Yes, and we have a presentation. We're going to be doing a volume count of cars, so we'll do a before and after, pre and post count of vehicles that are traveling down South Walnut, the congestion that is happening at the intersection of South Walnut and Limestone and Xenia Avenue, count how many cars are making that left turn. We also are going to be monitoring traffic that's moving north on Limestone into the neighborhoods on Phillip. So traffic flowing Limestone, Phillip, and Elm to see how the pattern changes. In addition to the observational studies, we'll have a survey that we'll release second and third week of and onwards of the study. We could do it the first week, but we think that the feedback may be skewed during that first week, so we'll let it play out for a little bit. So we'll have a very simple survey that another town, we're modeling after another town that had a similar traffic pattern change. So very basic questions, but very direct at getting at, did it solve the traffic congestion? Did it improve the safety? And what's the impact that it have on the commuters and their activities and driving in that area? So we'll have that survey ready to be released next week. So, all right, here's the presentation. So as a follow-up to the last Planning Commission, you wanted to see, someone suggested that we have architecture drawings, and the investment, the cost of setting up architecture drawings isn't, we don't have the funds to that. So this is a illustrations that we created to hope to address the request for information. So that this first slide indicates the traffic pattern, how that's going to be implemented. So we'll be converting South Walnut Street temporarily from one way from Short Street to Limestone. If at any point you feel that I'm revisiting stuff that we were talking about, just give me a cue and we can move faster on this. We'll add this diagonal parking. You'll see those illustrations for parking in the next slides. We would restrict that left-hand turn on South Walnut onto Limestone, so that'll be a right turn only. This diagram illustrates what kind of signs we're going to put up there. Those the round-way signs, the stop signs. Is it the same thing? Yes. I saw you looking. So the vehicles traveling on Short Street will be able to turn left and right on Walnut. That's that one-way converting Short Street. One-way, which you probably heard a lot about. Nearby businesses are concerned about this pattern change will have on their business. We've addressed the two issues that have come before us around this traffic pattern change, and that is, can the delivery trucks make the deliveries? And yes, they can. And we think that this is actually a safer way of doing so, because right now the delivery truck blocks the entire road to make deliveries. And cars either have to wiggle through a narrower space, or they have to go on oncoming traffic lane to get around. By only having one lane and the delivery truck stopping and blocking the entire lane, that will restrict traffic. So there isn't a going around the delivery truck anymore. And we'll have proper signage indicating the change. Next slide. This slide indicates where the diagonal parking would be, so there will be on both sides of the street. This is a way to accommodate a dedicated drop-off lane for the school. So that part in yellow in front of the school will be a dedicated drop-off zone. And the parking, diagonal parking, will be set up across the street. And this is pull-in parking. What they set up no parking on that designated drop-off, which is one of the recommendations made by several individuals. I'll take a moment to break from the presentation. We haven't said that that's not a good plan to have this dedicated drop-off zone. It becomes an issue of behavior. There's parking there that currently is being used by school staff, and they take up the space and they arrive to school before school drop-off and pickup times are. And so that restricts the flow of cars in that space and cars being able to pull off to drop children off. By us doing this, we'll ensure that there's no parking there. We'll have the dedicated drop-off. Cars come in, drop off their kids, and move on. And those that are looking to walk their kids into the front of the building or into the school, they can park on the street and just cross the street and walk their children in. Next slide, please. And this is the illustration for Short Street. This demonstrates the diagonal parking. The first parking spots will be dedicated to a handicap parking space and bicycle parking. Next slide, please. These are mock-ups of what the signs will look like on the street. I know it looks kind of small, but that first picture on the left, that's looking at Short Street coming from Walnut Street, so you'll see the wrong way sign. The second image, which is up on the right-hand upper right-hand corner there, that's the illustration of what Short Street looks on the other side, coming from Xenia Avenue. So you see the hardware store right there to the right. The bottom images, the one to the left, is the view of Elm while you're driving on South Walnut. So there are two signs there. One that says one way ahead, and then the second sign says one way. The picture on the bottom right shows that there'd be a stop sign at the intersection of Limestone and Walnut. It'll also show that there's a right turn only and no left turn. And then the signs on the top left indicate that there's a wrong way sign on the other side of the street. Next slide, and that is the wrong way sign view from Limestone looking into South Walnut. And that's the update that we promised at the last meeting. Any questions? Okay, talked about the survey. This initiative takes place the 21st and will run for 3 weeks. 3 weeks will give us enough time to observe a behavior change and get some good data points, and I'll run through November 9th.
And then after that, are you going to have a public hearing, something for people to come and comment on how they feel about it?
We'll release the survey results, and we'll engage the community on follow-ups. There are things that we think that we may do after this trial. I know that Dean had emailed us about the right-hand turn or left-hand turn, and others have emailed us about, okay, what comes after that? What are the things that you know that you may need to do as a result of this, or that you're already planning? And we're seriously considering the no parking on the north side of South Walnut Street, so in front of the school, during school drop-off and pickup. I think that can be a good solution to implement, and it'll ensure that staff or others who typically park there are not parked there during school drop-off, and so more cars can pull off.
So that sounds like there's not going to be a public hearing. You're going to use other ways to get information from people.
Yes, but we can schedule, if you If you would like to see a public meeting, we can schedule a public meeting. Our challenge with this is,
I personally feel for something so important that you should have, because it just seems to me that this would change our community substantially.
Don't we need the study first to see what comes out of the study before we can have a meeting on it? I mean, if they have the meeting, if you have the meeting before they get the study, they can have the study and they can release the study, and then we can debate about it after that. I mean, we don't want to jump the gun on it, I wouldn't think. I think we want to disseminate the information
I
first.
think that's fine to have the study, but I think there needs to be a public hearing. I would,
After the study.
After the study is what I'm saying. You can't have I can't have a meeting before the study's released, because we don't know what the study's going to, what the
That's true.
study's going to say at that point.
I would have liked a public hearing before any of this happened, because I think that you're getting a lot of people, and I think that there are some other suggestions that people have that might have been, you know, having the school do other things that, because they have all this land, they can probably create on it, you know, drop-off areas that other schools and other communities do such things, that there, you know, there are a variety of other ways to deal with it, and this is a community that likes to be able to give their opinion.
right.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is, I mean, if there aren't a lot of, you know, unusual findings, certainly it will come to council. I
Right.
think we'll just have to decide if it seems like it's going to be something that will add an hour to a council meeting. It's probably better to have a separate meeting rather than have council go until 11 o'clock at night. But I don't think we'll be able to make that decision until after the data are collected.
Right. And we'll know when we have that data, and we'll make the recommendations if we need additional time to hear the comment. I think we expect a lot of feedback on the survey.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Chairman,
Thank you.
would it be all right if I asked the building manager a question?
Real quick, yes.
Should he come up?
Yes, will you come up and state your name?
Chris Meacher. Hi. Jose, I didn't hear that you said that you'd be studying traffic on Elm Street, and if you didn't, I think you should consider that, because keep in mind now that you've got 100% of the traffic coming south on Walnut now is forced onto Elm Street to go somewhere else. And Elm Street, during school hours anyway, is fairly well used by students and parents, but, I mean, pedestrians. So there's just that potential of some sort of a conflict. So again, I don't know if you said Elm Street or not, but you might think about it.
Yes, we will be looking at traffic on Elm Street. Judy, are you able to go back to the first,
Yep,
the
just try to
second
buy
slide?
time, 'cause this
Okay,
thing is slow.
so we've done some scenario planning. Where do we expect traffic to go to? So I'll let you know what are some of the things we're looking at. Because of the no left turn on Walnut, we expect a lot of the traffic to move north on Limestone. So they'll travel north, and they'll either get to Dayton or find a way to get back to Xenia. And the way they'll get back to Xenia will be they'll use Phillip or High Street or go straight up Dayton. The effect on Elm Street would be that they could go north on Limestone, right onto Phillip, south on Elm, and then left on Walnut Street because they want to get back to that part of town. So those are some of the scenarios we're thinking about, and we'll be looking at.
Specifically referring to the scenario where you come off Dayton Street going south on Walnut, and then you get a
Yes,
potential dead end.
yes, and
You're forced to turn right.
your first, you turn left and
Elm.
right. You're able to turn both, in both directions. So South Walnut becomes one way from Short Street down to Limestone. So that traffic coming down on Elm Street can make that right or left. So we think that a lot of the traffic that we push into, we forcing them to turn right onto Limestone may go up to Limestone, Phillip, and down Elm to get back onto Walnut, to go back to that side of town or get back to the center of town.
But that will be part of it.
One way.
Yes, one way from Xenia Avenue into Walnut Street. So
I'm talking
the,
about from Dayton Street going south,
That's two-way,
that's two-way.
Yeah.
right to there.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's just one way this way.
Right.
And then you need to go around, yeah.
Yeah, the traffic coming on Xenia Avenue, if they're looking to get into that part of town, they're still able to turn left onto Limestone and go up to to Dayton Street.
I think what Chris is referring to is if you're coming down Dayton and you turn right on Walnut, you're on a dead end.
Because you can't turn on Short, and you can't keep going.
So you'd have to know to turn on Elm.
Right, right.
And if you get as far as the now Short Street change, you're stuck there. You've got to back up.
Oh, it's not.
There are no places to turn.
Well, you'll turn right onto Limestone
Well,
and
that's
then,
true. You'd have to be forced to go straight.
Right.
Sorry, that's fine. But anyway,
Okay.
yes, but those are scenarios we're thinking about.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, on to, it for the council report?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. On citizen comments, are there any citizen comments about any item that's not currently on the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go on to the public hearings. Do this one first.
Okay,
Okay.
yes,
The
okay.
first public hearing
Conversation.
is conditional use and site plan application from Miami Township trustees have submitted a conditional use and site plan review reapplication for the new fire station at 1001 Xenia Avenue. So,
And this is a reapplication. For those of you who have been on Planning Commission for a while, we did meet and have a conditional use hearing and a extensive site plan review in November of 2017. The conditional use expires within a year if a request for extension has not been made, and that was just something that didn't happen. So we're really just coming back for this, taking a look at it again for a reapproval. And I just wanted to just note a few changes that have been made from the original site plan to this one. One of the things was we had several conditions of approval, and you can see in that the stormwater runoff report was completed and it was approved by our village's contracted engineer. They did replat the 11 lots into one lot. They added the bike racks on the final drawings, and you can see those on this new one. It's probably hard to see on that. They have some loops for that. And then they actually removed the dumpster instead of having screening around it for on the final drawings. So one of the main things that they've done is they have reconfigured the parking. So the actual footprint of the building is less than 200 square feet more in size than it was before, but they reduced the height of the building significantly. And so they also created less impervious surface by shortening the width of the entrance of the driveway. They removed the ingress egress on the Marshall Street side, so all of the cars for the fire station will come in off of Herman Street. They anticipate about 12 cars in a shift. And they have reduced the size of the sidewalks. However, they're still 5 feet. I mean, so that's meets our code. And those kind of things that not only reduce but they did not change the stormwater detention area, even with the less impervious surface, so that's good. And this is also a way to reduce the cost. So,
Can we ask you a question, or should we wait?
go ahead.
Okay, so they removed the dumpsters from where they were going to have them, but they're going to have dumpsters.
No, they're not going, I don't think they're going to have dumpsters, but I don't know how they're planning on doing their trash
Okay,
pickup.
because that was the question I had.
And Chris is here.
It seems like you're going to
You
know
know, if you
something.
have any specific questions that I can't answer, Chris can probably
Okay.
answer those for you.
So maybe I'll wait till Chris. Well, the other one I had has to do with the stormwater. Because I know we talked I think at the last meeting, that we're going to be hopefully redoing requirements in the future. So they're going to be a little bit more stringent.
Well, we were already we were strict with them already.
Yes, but
Yeah.
you talked about wanting to, I'm not sure if we're consistent with the state of Ohio But you'd mentioned that, so I wanted to be sure
Right.
that this would meet those requirements.
Well, not knowing what those requirements are going to be, I don't know if they are meeting, if we decide to adopt stronger requirements based on a different time for rainwater to fall or
Because you're
not.
looking at a longer period of time, I
Ye-
think.
Right, yes, but it's definitely meeting what is required by the code now, and by Greene County, and really the state at this time. So, and our contracted engineer also approved the detention plan that they had in place.
Okay.
So the fact that they did not reduce the detention basin, but reduced the impervious surface even makes it better than
Okay.
before, in my opinion.
Oops, any questions?
Yeah, if there's any other questions here, we can open the public hearing, or have Chris come up.
Yeah,
And
Chris,
any questions for Chris?
want to say anything? Okay.
Okay, fire away.
Do you have anything you'd like to add? I mean, for example, with no dumpster.
What are you doing?
The old no dumpster. The dumpster was an idea or a design from our architects, not from input the township. We do not use dumpsters now and have never really used them in the past. We use just regular Rumpke tote gizmos, which we will have plenty of room for inside the facility, just like we do now, including recycling. So that's how that came about and then went away.
Anybody else have any questions?
Okay, construction's about to begin. We hope to be completed Labor Day of 2020, and everyone will be invited to a fun ribbon
Big
cutting.
party, huh?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay,
So this public hearing.
yes, okay. So now I'm going to, if anybody would like to comment on this conditional use reapplication, I'll open the public hearing. And if you'd like to comment, come up to the microphone, say who you are, and you have 3 minutes. Doesn't sound like anybody's going to come up and talk about this, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you very much. So we can, I guess, proceed to any additional discussion or questions, or are we ready to vote on the reapplication? The recommendations was back on page 9. Staff recommends reapproval of the conditional use and site plan review. Staff has no new conditions of approval, and the previous conditions have been met or included in the site plan.
I move to reapprove.
I will second that. Would you call the roll, please?
Yes? Stiles?
Yes.
Krieger?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Balata?
Yes.
Doden?
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, the second, excuse me, conditional use application is for conditional use application for a home occupation permit to receive clients for yoga and holistic classes at 1315 Corey Street. So, would you like to talk about?
At our
Just
last
continuation.
meeting, we had a question from the solicitor to explore what is meant by a cooperative arrangement business, and I did put into the plan that it's, the solicitor cited 170101 of the general corporation law
It's on page
definitions.
5.
On page 5, and believes the cooperative falls into the spirit of this definition. Staff made the suggestion that as long as there's only one instructor at any given time that is not a resident, Kim or Trent Warner, then that use would be met. I really don't have anything new. That was the main reason we were coming back. There was some questions about some concerns that came up
About
regarding the
traffic flow,
traffic.
parking.
Yeah, and so I mean,
Kids camp, yeah.
I did a site visit. There is ample parking on the property. There's two ways to enter on the property, and I'm just making the suggestion that if people wanted to pull in, go in one way and always come out the other way, so so cars aren't backing out as a possibility, and the first person that would be at the class then would park as far up as possible, and then the other cars behind. They could easily put 8 cars there, not a problem. So I did get a confirmation of the registration with the state of Ohio, Quarry Street Retreat, which had been applied for prior to this hearing back in, it was back in June. I think it was finalized right after the hearing. I think you finally got your final permit.
One was done very quickly, and then the second, there was the tax ID and then the SOC, or
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State,
Yeah.
approval, yeah. So that one, we needed to correct, it was like a grammatical error or something like that.
I got that one done, okay.
Then we have the staff recommendation with the conditions at the bottom of page 7 and on the top of page 8. Do you have any questions or concerns?
What do we
Yes,
decide on the
yes.
camp?
I think I did.
It's
have it
on page,
The recommendation is
Yeah.
that the,
Yeah, and then the other
Not be
thing,
there.
does she have a
Yeah.
copy of this? Do you have
oh, and
a
then
copy of
the,
this?
I'm sorry,
Here.
you didn't get a copy?
Did you email it to me?
No. It's online.
Here, I've got,
So, the,
no, here, take this. I have 2.
All right.
at the last meeting, it came up about the yoga camp, and even at the last meeting, it was determined that you just wouldn't have the yoga camp.
Yeah,
Would you state your name, please?
Kim Warner.
Thank you.
We discussed it even before we left the building, that we would just ask them to find a new place, and they graciously agreed to do that, even though they had a previous agreement, so they were very gracious about it. And also, since that day, we've already implemented the parking strategy. It's been great. We'll just continue communicating it to people if we notice that people start parking on the street, but they're doing exactly that. The instructor pulls in first, and then everyone behind them, and they all leave together. So they're being
Kim, for
very,
purpose of the application, the original application did include both the yoga studio and the children's camp, correct?
No.
no, because I hadn't really.
I just wanted to clarify
Yeah,
that.
No,
Okay, so that was never, those were never tied
No.
together. Okay, all right.
no. It was something that they've been doing, but it wasn't on my radar.
I believe you mentioned at the last meeting that you keep a log,
Yes, they
Oh,
keep a very
okay.
good log, and my husband and I are going to use,
and that's ongoing?
Yes.
And because there's the number 6 at the top of page 8, at least top of page 8 of mine, maybe it's different on yours. The number of classes, or clients does not exceed 8 per week, or 8 per day, 40 per week.
yes.
Did you find those recommendations? They're on page, at the end, 7 and 8.
The bottom of page 7.
Did you find it?
It says per class. Okay.
Yeah, there are, these they're numbered 1 through 7.
I see her point, however, because is the minimum 8 per day, or can you have
It's 8
40
per-
people one day and
It's
none of
8
the
per
rest of the
day.
week?
I'm sorry.
It is 8 per day?
Because I had it in the other part of that as 8 per day, under number
Number 1.
6.
Number 6 says 8 per day,
So
40
the
per
code says no more than 8 per day, 40 per week. So that needs to be corrected.
So number 1 needs to be changed.
I did also have, I don't know how that, I had sent a change, so I don't think you got the new one.
It's changed online, and it's changed everywhere but the paper packet.
Okay, so in the one online, can you read number 5? Because I changed that.
Number 5
later.
should read, "No classes that will generate noise or repetitive sounds beyond the Warner's property that is above the maximum allowable decibels per the village's noise ordinance."
Instead of telling them they can't have drums or something, can't really do that. So that,
But we do have a noise ordinance.
but we have a noise ordinance, so we changed it to that.
It's fine. That's passed.
And
Because it's been how many years since the,
Well, my dad died 3 years ago, and he was pretty sick for a year before that. I really don't know when they did it, or I have no idea really when.
And under number 7, I did talk with Samantha Stewart, who is our Park and Rec coordinator, and she said, she'd be happy to talk to you. There are places within here where you could rent out for a couple hours. I think it'd be important to let her know you're a nonprofit, if that's what you are. If you're a for-profit, it'd be a different rate. But then, they've got the Gaunt Park pool in the summertime.
For the
It'd
kids'
be-
camp?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
wanted to do something for an all-day event, she'd be
Yeah.
happy to talk to you about
Great.
what we offer here at the village.
Great, that would be great. And
that-
actually, we met her, we went and looked at is she at the Wellness Center? Oh, no, no?
She's in the youth center here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great, thank you. I'd love to talk to her.
Sure.
Okay,
do you have anything else you'd like to add?
no,
Okay. Anybody else have any questions at this point? Okay. What's that?
I didn't say anything.
Oh,
The women, she has open, we have comment
Okay.
when it's time for that.
Right, yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. If anybody has any comments they'd like to make, particularly if there's anything that we didn't hear about noise, parking, traffic and children last time. So if there's any new information, please present that to us and try to limit the comments to about 3 minutes. Okay? So state your name.
Maria Verdani. I live next door at 1325 Quarry. Okay, I have these, I got the zoning things here in front of me. They were sent to me yesterday. Anyway, D, on D it says this, the use should be, this is all about the co-op. I think she said she had several teachers that were coming in to use the place. Okay, on D it says, the use shall be carried on only by the residents of the dwelling and not more than one other person. And then over here, employment of more than one full-time equivalent person not resident on the premises at any one time is not permitted. So if a co-op is a whole lot of, I don't know how many yoga teachers she said, but that's in these, the zoning, the
Well,
planning and zoning code.
Yeah, and we had the attorney look into that since the last meeting, and so.
Yes, and?
Maybe he can talk to that after a bit, but go ahead.
How does it, well, I mean, when they said it, when I was comparing it to what you just said or what they said last time about several yoga teachers, and this just says the residents and not more than one other person. So I have it right here in front of me. That's in the code, and it's D. And sounds, emissions, here's an F, says appearance of the dwelling should not be, okay, and skip ahead to, it shall not be changed, the residential character by lighting or the emission of sounds, vibrations. I do hear sounds and vibrations coming through her wall.
What, today? Or
No,
now?
just, well, I don't know what it was. It sounded like somebody was doing some kind of dancing. And
When was this?
just a few weeks ago, or 10 days ago, and I heard it in my house, so I opened the door to make sure where it was coming from, and it was from there. So other than that, it's been quiet, but my problem has been in the past, and I wrote you the letter about all those problems.
The drumming and stuff?
That's why I got this. That's why I got these printed out for me to read them, word for word, what is allowed and what isn't allowed. So I circled them here about the sounds of and vibrations. I hear sounds and vibrations, and I don't know, it's just, our houses are fairly close.
Where do you live?
At 1325. I can give you, last time you did not have very good,
She's next door.
Next
you
door,
did not,
okay.
let me show you something. This will help you. Sorry, I only made 7 of them, but you can have my copy. Last time I was here, the picture up there was really confusing. Not a good picture at all. So I made a very good picture for everybody. Look at, study. Nah, that's no good. Look at this.
Okay.
Have a look. This is
So
what I-
she's off mic right now.
We can share.
We can share.
That's okay. Get it out.
It's under conditional use
So
requirement.
this is their property.
My driveway
Specific
and her
requirements, I'm
driveway
sorry. Specific requirements.
are back to back. So,
What am I supposed to do? Oh, she parks right there.
I live at 1325.
So it's your.
Excuse me, it's important that you stand by that mic. That mic isn't so that we can hear you better, that mic is so that the public record is captured. Thank
All right.
you.
I live at 1325 Corey Street there, and then these are all the houses around it. And Doris Hupschman, who we've discussed this for years.
We have her letters.
Yeah, and she brought up a good point. She sent me her letter about when a person has a business, it's usually just one thing, like, say, hairdressing, one thing going on there. So and then that got me to think, well, if she has a whole lot of yoga teachers, that's more than one business going on. She can have her what is it? Her business of, I forget what it was called. Yeah. Anyway, and then maybe one other yoga teacher, according to these rules.
Okay.
That's what I'm
What,
pointing out.
yes, and, similar
Wait.
concerns were brought up at the last meeting, and so we had the solicitor sort of look into, because that was a question, it's part of the reason why we continued it on to this meeting. Was
Okay.
to just look into that issue. So, would you mind sort of explaining sort of legally what the?
Okay. Yeah.
If you'd like to sit down, if it's
No, I
more
can
comfortable.
stand.
Okay.
I just can't tell if you can hear me through
yeah,
the...
we're
I can hear you.
Well, I
Can you
can't
hear
hear
me?
myself. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So, the first place that we need to start is, and I will address the question specifically about persons, is that under the Yellow Springs codified ordinances, the process here is a hearing process by which the Planning Commission makes a determination of whether or not it will approve the home occupation with or without conditions.
I understand that.
The critical part of that is that if the zoning administrator cannot determine if the home occupation conditional use requirements are met in his or her sole discretion, the zoning administrator may refer the matter to the Planning Commission for a conditional use hearing in accordance with the procedures. So that's why we're here.
Right, I understand that.
So then the question is, the use shall be carried on only by residents of the dwelling and not more than one person. The definition of person can be found in many places in the Ohio Revised Code, but a commonly used definition is found in the area of corporate law, which says that a person includes, without limitation, a natural person, an unincorporated society or association, which effectively is a co-op. The Planning Commission then has to make a determination if the application or the permit falls within the spirit of what the zoning code is, knowing that the code does allow for home occupations. There are other principles that come into play that the village aspires to. One, it can be affordability. Another is that under the law, property rights cannot be unreasonably interfered with. So when someone makes an application to say, I would like to use my property in a certain way, there's a balancing that has to happen. So in this context, and I think then if you go to the staff report, The staff report has taken this into account. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around to different sources here. But the staff report talks about let's see here, makes reference to that only one person who is not a resident can be there in at a time. The staff has concluded that that falls within the spirit of what the Yellow Springs zoning code requires. I have advised staff that the definition of persons is broader than just a human being in that sense under the law. And staff then has made that recommendation to the Planning Commission as to why the recommendation would be to permit this home occupation under this unique set of circumstances, which is another critical factor. Each permit is considered on the individual facts and circumstances of that permit and application. And if Planning Commission then chooses to approve this permit and application with or without the conditions that it puts on there, that is within the discretion of the Planning Commission, based upon the unique facts set forth in this application.
So that I can clarify my understanding of what you just said in like simpler.
Yes, I'm sorry it was so complicated.
No less. So what I think that, what you are affirming is that so long as there is only one other person there in addition to the occupant, at any given time, it doesn't have to be the same one person. So, but it still needs to only be one person. So there can't be the homeowner and 3 people, or it can't be the homeowner and 2 people. It can be the homeowner and 1 other person, but that person does not have to be the same person all the time.
That's correct. That under the definition of person in the Ohio Revised Code, an unincorporated association, one can argue that this would fit within that definition.
So there aren't a lot of people there. There's not a lot of people working in the building at the same time.
Correct.
Okay, I think
It's
you
just
did.
one person.
I think you did say that last time, but when I looked at this, I said, oh, 1, okay. Is that a
That's why we
co-op?
had to find out.
And your point is well taken.
Yes.
But again, on a case-by-case
1 is
basis.
1, yeah, but
yes.
now you're saying 1 is okay. There is more than 1.
Well, that's a staff recommendation. The Planning Commission gets to decide whether or not that's okay.
Okay, here's
But,
another
you know,
one.
and the Planning Commission also, you know, our options on something like this is either to, you know, we may approve it, we may deny it, or we may modify it, and that's where we get to the recommendations that we have for, you know, if we're going to approve it with particular conditions.
Okay, I understand. I knew you were doing that last year, last month. Another thing, necessary conditions. A home occupation is permitted only, will not change the residential ambience and character of the neighborhood. And that's what my neighbors and I have all talked about for a long time, that this neighborhood is not the same anymore as it used to be, you know, and I've lived there a long time to know that because of this going-ons in that house. So, how will you address that?
I'd like to address that as a staff person.
All right.
I think that from your original letter, when you wrote that letter, you were talking about the house itself and the people that previously had lived in it.
Right.
And it's really,
understand.
the home occupation is really about the people that are running it, not the structure. So I think
It's the structure.
it's not fair to put what previous occupants that were in that house doing that home occupation and passing that on to
The new one.
new people.
This new thing,
Yeah,
right.
because
I
it
understand.
can honestly change. I mean.
I hope so.
I deal with complaints all the time, and I've had complaints where a person, it's just one person, they're not holding a class, but they're doing obnoxious things to
Yeah.
bother the neighbors.
Oh.
And it happens a lot. So, you know, I think that from a staff recommendation, we really drilled down on what we got the cars off the street.
Yes.
You know?
Very
the-
nice,
The
yeah.
yoga
I like
camp, I don't know if they're going to agree with me or not. These are staff recommendations.
Yes, I understand.
But we really tried to find, staff tried to find, we heard what you said.
Yes,
We
I know
tried
you
to
did.
find a compromising position.
Yes.
And staff feels that you need to give them a chance.
Well, all right. I hope, well, okay, I'm here by myself, although I've discussed it with neighbors. I got calls from the neighbors, and that's why I gave you these. I wanted you to see it better than what was.
We do have a noise ordinance.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that noise has to be calibrated using an instrument from your property. It cannot, you can't like take it to their property and take the reading. It has to be, what is the noise level
Yeah.
at your property? And I mean,
Okay.
you know,
Well, if I
I
hear it,
honestly think that regular voices,
that's okay. Yeah.
that's
I
not
hear
gonna,
voices.
that's not gonna calibrate to the level that would
Okay.
break our noise ordinance.
Yeah, all right. Well, I hear voices on the bike. Voices don't bother me. Anyway, well, my house has high ceilings, and any sound outside is amplified. If
Yeah.
there's a dog barking outside, it will sound louder outside than in my house.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
So
So,
that's why I
it's hard
open
to
my
say.
door, that's why I open my door and step out and say, okay,
Well,
and
thank
that's
you.
how I know, that sounds real
Sounds do
outside.
travel, that's
And-
true.
Right. So,
All right.
are we allowed to hear some sounds, or
Yes.
what if it bothers us? It's just a matter of, it bothers me, but it might not bother the police if they come and go, that's not so bad.
Because if it
It's
doesn't,
all based on decibels and, you know.
Oh, decibel.
Decibel sound, yeah.
I
We only
see.
have so much we can do.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, all right. Okay, well, I tried.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody else that would like to comment on this? Okay, not then I'm going to close the public hearing. We'll turn it back up here. Any additional questions or concerns anybody here has? Would you read what you currently have, so we're all working with the same language on the conditions?
Are you going to make a motion to approve with those conditions?
Well,
Or
I
you
wanna
want to
hear
go
them
through them to,
first. I'd
okay.
like to hear them first,
I think
just
there's only
to make sure that-
one change, but,
Okay.
so I modified one. So the first one is only 8 clients per day, up
Okay.
to 40 per week. 2 is all client parking shall be off-street with no more than 8 cars allowed. 3 is consider having clients enter from one location and exit from the other so there's not an issue with turnarounds or backing out onto Corey Street. 4, inspection of dwelling by Miami Township Fire and Rescue, copy of certificate of compliance required. 5, no classes that will generate noise or repetitive sounds beyond the Warner's property that is above the maximum allowable decibels per the village's noise ordinance. 6, allow Ms. Warner's one-on-one personal fitness training classes in addition to the yoga classes, as long as the total number of clients does not exceed 8 per day and 40 per week. 7, no children's yoga camp. And 8 is somewhere.
I don't have an eight.
There's no, I don't think there's any aid.
Okay.
There's no eight.
So you made reference.
I have a question on
Okay,
the
that was
number
just
of
repeated. Yeah,
cars.
that's all I've got.
Because I understand that they can have 8 clients per day, so
Right.
that could be a class. But if there's an instructor, that might be a 9th car. And we have put down no more than 8
Specified 8 cars.
cars.
Well, if you want to amend that, go ahead.
Does that, I mean, does that sound reasonable, Will?
Yeah, there's nothing in the zoning code against the number of cars, so we can amend that.
Well,
Did we
actually, I was
take the
going
number
to,
out?
But wait, it's, the change is only 8 clients per day, not per
Yes.
class.
Yes.
So,
Per day.
so then they're, because they're not all there at once, they,
They might be. It might be one class.
what, but
Yeah.
Where did
It
the,
won't
where
be
did the
because
car
we
number
can't use
come
the
from?
same space.
No.
That will never happen.
There wouldn't be 8 people there for a class?
There would be, but then I wouldn't have a client at the same time because we wouldn't have the space to
No,
use.
I
What
was
she's
talking about.
saying is,
Wait a minute, J says, if you look under J, it's indicated there's up to 12 cars on the property can be parked.
Yeah, and
So I
I
don't
don't
think that's
know
an
that
issue.
you can you limit the number of
No, there's
cars
not
on
a,
someone's
I don't think
private
there's a car
property?
number on here.
What I was
hope
talking
not.
about was that you would have an instructor for the class. So you might have 8 people there for that class.
Oh, I
But
see.
you said the cars
Should
are
we just-
12
Well,
cars.
12
but see,
cars.
But here, we're proving these conditions, and we're stating no more than 8.
And so
I
maybe we
think.
should just get rid of the,
Yep,
I
with
don't
no more
think
than
you
8
can,
cars allowed.
Yeah.
Just
don't
say,
think you
Yeah,
can
go
all
ahead.
planned parking shall be off-street.
yeah, all
Right.
planned parks shall be off-street, yep.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
period.
Yep.
that's better. Thank you.
Okay, but now I have a question. So what if someone new comes and they, or for whatever reason, they park on the street? Am I allowed to use the space in front of my street, my house, to park on? I mean, I just don't want to
Yeah.
put, it's going to be okay, like, we are going to do what's best for our neighbors and for, you know, as many people as possible to do what we want to do. If we could take that stuff out so that it's just reasonable without counting and saying, oh, you know, I mean, most people, half the people ride their bikes. I know in the winter it won't be like that, but we're encouraging them to do that if they can.
I guess I sort of look at it that these aren't just your guests coming. I would say if you had a guest, certainly they could park on the street. These are people that are coming there specifically for the business. And it seems like the business traffic, we are trying to keep
Off
on
the
your
street.
property
Right.
and off the street.
Right.
And we definitely are communicating that, and that's our intention. I just don't want to be penalized if someone parks on the street, and how will we prove that it wasn't my cousin who was visiting me, or it was someone in a class? I just don't want to make it so that we have to run around trying to prove that this car belonged to this person, and I don't know if there's a way we can word it so that it's implied, but there isn't a number on it.
Can I make a suggestion? Because I don't think the police department wants to be in the position of trying to determine who's there for a class and who's there to have a cup of tea either. So could you preface it by saying, to the extent reasonable, all client parking shall be off-street? Because it's a complaint-driven code, it would seem logical that if there are consistent complaints about a high number of cars on the street, that would rise to the level of concern and not a reasonable
Not one
extent.
car that's
So-
parked there.
Does that
Yeah.
sound?
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Because honestly, the police department, if there was one car parked in front of your street, the police department would be okay. There's nothing against that.
Well, and other people park in front of my house that I don't know.
Right,
So I
exactly.
don't want to have to do that either, and
Yeah.
I don't want to get mad at my neighbors if they park, I mean, I would never do that, so
Yeah.
I would never want to have to enforce that
It's
against
a
my
good
neighbors.
point. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a suggestion for her about parking.
We're really trying to get through these right now,
Okay,
okay?
well, this is about helping her out with the
Well,
parking.
and you could offer that to her afterwards. We're trying to
Well-
work this out.
All right.
8, so we're at only 8 plants per day.
Right, just with number 6, Denise, with the allowed lessons warners, one-on-one personal training, not to exceed 8 per day that's the total.
That's the total.
Just making sure it
Because
wasn't
her-
a
yeah,
new
because her-
unique set,
Because
okay.
she doesn't have these yoga classes every day of
Right.
the week, so, and she also doesn't have 8 in each class, so she could still run her
Sure.
fitness. Yeah, the wording might have been weird,
It's great.
yeah.
Other
Can we make it grayer?
questions?
Oh, I said it was great. Great, great, Denise, you did a great job.
Can I have a question about the yoga camp, because it was not in the initial request. Can that simply be struck? She never requested a children's yoga camp.
Well, I mean, it was brought up as a,
Prior use, along with drumming.
But they were doing it last year, weren't you? Or was there a camp last year?
There was one, I think, before we bought the house in June.
Okay, I think that's why I brought it up then.
Is there any harm in leaving it in there?
Yeah, I'm more comfortable leaving it
Let's leave it,
in,
yeah.
because that seemed to be an issue.
Yep.
If we are able to. Chris?
Okay, I wondered, it just wasn't, it's not on the original
Are we able to?
application.
Able to say it again?
leave it in there even though it's not something that she had made a request for. It was the prior occupants that had the children's camp.
I'm not tracking.
Can we leave this in as a requirement?
I'm
No
suggesting
yoga
that doesn't
camp,
need to be there.
even though
She's not
she-
made a
No
request
children's
for it.
yoga camp.
I think it's a distinction without a difference. There's no application, but it reflects that the issue was addressed. There were concerns by citizens, and I think it reflects that the planning commission has taken that into account.
Any other questions or concerns?
And as usual, these could be revisited at a later date if something comes up,
Yes.
correct?
Potentially.
Okay.
We have a motion.
I move approval of the conditional use application with the conditions listed, what are they, 7 conditions listed that have been revised.
I'll second it.
All right,
Would you call the roll, please?
Krieger.
Yes.
Stiles.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Palata.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
thank you.
All right, on to text amendments. That's our first one. For the, should we do the trees, plants, and shrubbery? Removal of plants and weeds, removal of weeds. Do that one first. Everybody have that one?
Yep. Yeah. So this one is about it's about tightening it up so it isn't taking staff as long to remediate an issue. We have in our zoning code a requirement that if a person does not remove the vegetation, then the next step is the village, tries to do that, which requires us to get several bids, and we have had a very tough time getting people to even respond at all, even one. And if a property is really in bad shape, they might just not drive by and never call us and not want to do it at all. So it just causes us a lot of, it slows down, it has really slowed down these issues for us. So we just wanted to consider removing that language, and I wanted to just go through step by step of the Chapter 674 weeds where we were making those changes. Under 67401, striking out where the village would then cut them down or trim them down. And that's trees, plants, and shrubbery. And then under B, under 67401B, striking out notwithstanding any action by the village to eliminate the violation, that falls back to that original one about the village having to remediate it. Then at the very end, assessment of costs by village, 67403, we now have a door knocker notification that we can also do for people. So it gives us the option of either sending it by regular mail or through this notification that hangs on a person's door. I did ask if we could increase the time by regular mail for 10 days, because often what happens, especially if I send something out on a Friday,
Yeah.
people might not get it till Monday or Tuesday, and then then they call and they're panicked because they hadn't even found someone to take care of it yet. So giving somebody 10 days, and then taking out this, again, the section about the village manager having to be responsible for trimming or removing it. Instead, we'd go straight to a citation, a court appearance citation if they're not going to take care of it. And the reason, as I explain later, for a court appearance citation for a minor misdemeanor was to allow the mayor to have an opportunity to see if they can bring in pictures to show that they had actually taken care of it. And the mayor had suggested that. And then 67404 is just taking out that assessment of costs by the village because we would not be assessing the cost for mowing services that we did. And that's pretty much it. That's just to tighten up the tree and weed ordinance.
Do you have any questions?
All right, I have a, reality process question. So, let's say this happens, the person doesn't take action, there's an issuance of a court appearance citation for a minor misdemeanor, they ignore it, or they come and then it just repeats. I mean, I just am wondering what in reality, what the cycle of this might turn into.
Do you want me to answer?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's getting into the police code
Getting
now.
into the weeds.
That's a great question. That happens in other areas of misdemeanor enforcement. Typically, one sees that with enforcements with driver's licenses, with people who don't have them, and it becomes this cycle of what I'll call a power struggle. One would think that in a community as small as the village, that and I'm going to use this word with a good context, the coercive powers that exist, i.e. a consequence in mayor's court, and the potential for other zoning violations would obtain the desired result. But all laws are written with an assumption that there will be compliance with them. The other aspect of this is that there could be repeated citations so that the consequence of the penalties compounds. And then one would hope that the monetary consequences would compel someone to say, I'll get rid of the weeds. I mean, but when we talk about junk cars, it's just impossible to think of all the ways that people will try to either skirt what the law is or just be obstinate. And so when you pass something like this, you do it in the hopes that people will just do the right thing because that's how the rest of us choose to engage.
Thank you.
I mean, if they don't, what's our recourse? Do we go with liens? I mean, can we put
Well,
liens on the house, or what?
Not in the context of there's because we've turned it, a minor misdemeanor is technically not a criminalized charge, but there are consequences for failing to appear in court, which could lead to warrants for someone's arrest, and that's where the real compulsive power comes in. I cannot imagine that this mayor's court has issued many warrants for arrest, in part because we know where you live, and one would hope that the knock on the door would solve that problem. But I would think that if somebody was really, really becoming obstinate, there's other things. But let's face it, I think that what we have learned over time, not just in Yellow Springs, but in almost all communities, when situations devolve, it's because there's usually some type of other issues going on. And we have community resource with PD, and there's some other avenues that we would take, so that I don't think that it would have to be handled in a heavy-handed manner, but it's going to require the exercise of discretion by staff.
Other questions? I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing on this. If anybody would like to talk.
So now, just to be clear, are we opening the public hearing on 674.01? What are, because we have separate sections.
Or the sole subject matter.
I was just going to go for the subject matter. So 67401, 02, and 03. Can we do all three at once? Or no?
Yes, but I would state that when you open the
Okay.
public hearing, that it's on all three.
The subject matter right of it.
Okay. And so the subject matter of the code for weeds, which includes 67401, 67402, 67403, and 67404. Okay? So please state your name and try to limit your comments to about 3 minutes, please.
Mitzi Miller, I live at 428 West Limestone, and have had issues with a neighbor regarding grass issues. And I appreciate our zoning department and council looking, and zoning department looking at this issue and trying to tighten up loose ends. One of the things I would suggest is that, and I want to make sure that it's going to the property owner, not the person who's renting or leasing a property. I think you're going to have, there'll be more impact with that person in getting results, hopefully. I would also like to see a certified letter go out to that person, so there's record. And if somebody is doing a doorknob notice, then a picture's taken of that, so you have some kind of record that somebody just doesn't throw the letter or throw the doorknob notice away. And I guess my only concern is, once it goes to mayor's court, as Mrs. Krieger said, is, can it just continue, and how are you going to proceed with that? That you definitely are locking this in. I've had issues with a neighbor for probably 3 to 4 years, and things aren't working. And so, and it's very frustrating. But I appreciate, like I said, the effort recently that things are moving in hopefully the right direction.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
I like the idea of the certified letter. That seems like a,
If we do a certified letter, then we're gonna have to increase the time again, because certified letters take a lot longer. I often don't get those back for 10 days, it's maybe longer, it just depends.
oh, the notification of delivery?
Yeah, because they
Right.
sometimes make an attempt, if the person isn't there, they come back.
There has to be somebody
There has
there
to be
to sign
someone
it.
there,
Yeah, I
and,
see.
and,
If they're working, that can be a problem.
And it's an added
If they're-
expense as well.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll also say that if you know a certified letter is coming, because we've had this issue with Utility Dispute Resolution Board, you will not sign. And then you don't get your.
So
certified letter.
how might we, then, let's talk about the intent then of the certified letter, which is to have some assurance that it was delivered.
Documentation.
Yeah, is there any other thing that could happen other than a certified letter?
And if they're door knocking too, if they're taking pictures of the door knocker hanging it.
the door knocker that we have, it has a cover on it, so they can't change anything, the dates, it's sealed, and then they'll take a picture. We've already discussed that,
Okay.
yeah.
It's kind of a best efforts with reasonable time
Yeah,
constraints.
reasonable.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
filled out, and then it removes this thing, so this covers on it, so they can't change anything on this, on the knock, what was written. And then a picture would be taken, and we keep a record of it. But let me start by just reminding everybody that our first attempt isn't even a letter. Our first attempt is usually a phone call. And 90% of the time or more, people take care of it.
I can tell you in practices in other communities, if anybody ever finds themselves in court for anything related to yard maintenance, zoning, failure to paint, they have ignored so many efforts because it is so expensive for the municipality to continue the efforts to get somebody to comply. So they're going to exhaust the other processes by which to say, please just do this so I don't have to do more. And that the phone call or the knock on the door is just the low-hanging fruit of common sense. And I think that's really what we're talking about here.
Currently, a certified letter is $6.89,
Right,
something like that.
So I want to get back, I just have a question then, because I know, I'm
Jump
sorry.
in, and I'm going to officially close the public hearing now, since, just want to make sure we got that done, all the rules.
So if we do have that one obstinate customer resident, and I know where Mitzi's going with this, is that we're gonna have that obstinate customer. What is our recourse? I mean, we can exhaust it, or what, you know, and again, if it's a landlord-tenant kind of relationship too, I mean, we're gonna go to the landlord, obviously, under that relationship, but if there's a situation where she's having, where do we go? I mean, how are we gonna?
Well, I kind of think that adding this court citation, which has never been added before, and making them have to come in and
Okay.
appear in court, that's a whole step we've never taken before.
All I'm trying to get is, as long as we're
Yeah.
building a case,
Yeah.
as long as the case file is building and moving in the right direction, that we can build on that.
And then in the landlord-tenant scenario, there are those lease issues. But again, we don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on between a private contract.
Yeah, I know there was a suggestion that was made by someone who said, well, you know, you should really apply that to the tenant. But our zoning code does not allow that. We only have the property owner as our record because our record is Greene County's records. And that's where things are recorded, they're legal. So we have to file our letters with the property owner rather than the tenant.
Okay.
We just don't know what the lease agreements are.
But that's what I
So
want to
the
get on record.
issuance of the
Yeah.
court appearance will go to the owner as well.
That's what I want to get on record, just for that we're talking
Yeah.
about the landlord, whoever owns the land, the house, not the homeowner, whatnot, whoever owns it.
Yeah, it's
that's
the
where
owner,
going
it's
to.
not the tenant. Yeah,
Okay.
they're getting the citation.
Is it the owner of the land or the owner of the house?
The owner of whatever's on Greene County, whatever's on
property.
Greene County auditors.
The property, the owner of the
Property
property.
search is who
The
gets
property.
the citation, yeah.
All right, so I just want to get clear.
But
Yeah.
let me also be clear. If the owner does not live in state, there are potential issues on how you get that person served and enforcement. I mean, there are a myriad of issues that could evolve from this.
That's true.
And as the village's legal advisor, I have personal biases against changing laws because you have a unique situation that may or may not occur again. The changes that staff are recommending here, though, make sense in the context of
Yes.
a broader-based situation. The situation that may be ongoing, some efforts have been made to resolve that. I think it will be resolved, and those resolutions would almost always come outside of the village code anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns?
Mitzi, are you good with that, Mitzi, with where we're going? I mean, look, the big elephant in the room is the house is a home inc house. That's what the issue is. And that's what we're talking about. Landlord, tenant, landowner, homeowner, where do we stand? That's where the problem is. That's where we're looking for clarity.
Can I just add something too?
Yeah.
I apologize.
You
But
need to
I
come
You
up.
need to come up,
Come
though.
up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it does tighten things up, what you're doing. And, you know, when you're told to go to mediation, you know, this is going to that isn't going to happen. You're going to take it straight to court. And so, to me, tightening things up is definitely the way to go, and I hope this works for everybody in the community. Because it's not just my issue, there's other issues too, so. And I think, you know, when you look at zoning, you know, things change, and you have to make changes, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I still am holding a concern that I agree with what Chris said, is that we're turning weeds into a misdemeanor. And I mean, it feels heavy, it feels very heavy-handed, and it does maybe feel as if it's in response to, you know, behavior that's way out of the
norm.
bell-shaped curve, which may be why, another reason to say that it's fine, because the more moderate behavior, as you said, you make a phone call and they take care of it. Or you maybe leave the door knocker and they take care of it, that it just wouldn't go this far. But, I mean, there's just this part of me that's kind of sitting back and looking at it and saying, really, Yellow Springs? You're going to bring someone into court for their long waits?
But this is very, very tame. Most communities would criminalize the act so that there would be possible jail time associated with it.
Really?
Yes. Yes, so the fact that this is a minor misdemeanor, a monetary fine only.
All right.
Limits the control of what the mayor can really do by way of coercion, because it's just money. I mean, this is very,
This
very
is just
mild.
money,
This is
right.
really scaled down
All right.
to what you would see almost everywhere else.
And what is the amount of money, I guess? when you say-
$150 fine, well, the possible penalty is $0 up to $150 in fine, plus the assessment of course costs, which the mayor would have the ability to waive all or some of either the fine or the court costs.
So there's not a cost per day being levied?
No.
Okay.
But it could lead to repeated citations for the failure to comply,
So-
because that's the coercive ability that the
Okay.
statute.
So if they have to appear in court, they appear in court, they show that everything's taken care of, they let it all grow back again, they get another misdemeanor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that
okay.
happens.
All right, well, thank you for the clarification of that, because, it just, the differentiation between the criminalization of it versus a monetary impact is, I think, an important one to make. Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody want to make a motion?
I move that we approve the recommendations by the staff.
And I'm
Or you're going to have to spell out each one.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to do each one?
Well,
Just,
Okay.
we're not doing the ordinances, but but if
The
you spell,
numbers.
can we
The
spell
text
them all out in
amendments.
one motion?
So I move the approval of the text amendments 674.01, 674.02, 674.03, and the removal of 674.04.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Accept the text amendments. Would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Williams.
yes.
Salata.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Stiles.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, moving on.
Moving on to the,
Junk vehicles.
and then general offenses, section 660.07, and zoning, section 1260.03D, and zoning 1272.05.
So, just briefly mentioning again that we have a conflict in the code, codified ordinances with junk vehicles, whereas the general offenses code, which is enforced by the police department, allows for one junk car on a property. The zoning code, which was adopted in 2013, does not have that allowance. And a recent situation came up where the police officer a complaint was made about a junk car, and they weren't able to do anything about it because there was the allowance of one. Staff is recommending that we remove the one junk car being left on the property, and perhaps giving a little bit longer of a time period to allow that person to remove it. I know there was some questions that came up about affordability, if there was something, a car that was broken down, they needed to have time to fix it. But I can go through the different sections of the code with you with the changes that I'm suggesting. In Exhibit A, which is 660.07, the storage of junk vehicles, unlicensed vehicles, and inoperable vehicles on private property with permission of owner. I'm suggesting under C, it's prohibited acts. No person shall keep, store, place, or allow to remain on any private property within the corporate limits of the village any unlicensed vehicle, and just taking out that part about more than one. Or a junk vehicle, or inoperable historic or collector vehicle, and adding in there, giving them 7 days to fix it, or they need to enclose it within a garage. As part of that, we then just strike out the remedying it within 30 days of the notice and go straight to D, notice to remove. Gives the police department shall serve written notice upon which any unlicensed vehicle, junk vehicle, or inoperable vehicle, or any part or parts thereof that is improperly stored, or by leaving written notice at the property, or they even said they might even go to the property and give them the notice, that they have a set amount of days, 15 days of receipt of the notice, to either house it in a garage or a suitable permanent structure, or remove it. So this is interesting, so they have 7 days to enclose it, but we're giving 15 days to remove it. That's under the police department. Wonder why they have it. They have 30 days.
So what does that mean? If it's there for 7 days, like 8 days, then the neighbor could complain, and then the police would go out, and then the police would say, you have the 15 days to remove?
Yeah. So the prohibited act is that you have 7 days to repair your inoperable vehicle, or to find a place to store your collector in the car that's not working. Then, if somebody has it stored there for a year and the neighbor complains, the police come, they're giving them a written notice, and they have 15 days to remove it.
Okay.
And then, rather than having, there's a section in the code that allows a person to have an extension of time. And in the previous code, it gave them 30 days, but they could ask for an additional 60 days. And what we have seen in the past is people that have come on the 30th day and then asked for 60 more days. And this has happened a couple times. And so now they've had 1/4 of a year, and it's still going on. And it just kind of, it's like, why are we extending it? There isn't any reason to extend it beyond the,
So are we calling that a junk car, or are we calling that a car under repair? I mean, or an abandoned car, or an automobile? Inoperable. What do we, I mean, a repaired car, inoperable car, or just a junk car?
if it's not able to run, if it doesn't have a license on it, there's no title to it.
Definitions.
Yep.
All of those things. And didn't we have photos too today of
There are
different,
photos.
photos of different types of,
I think that there's different categories of junk vehicle when you look at the definition.
This is my point, that's why I want to get it for the record, I just want to hear it for the record.
So you mean like what I drove when I was in college?
Right,
with
so-
junk
Well,
but
no,
not
no,
inoperable?
because Lisa, you drove it. But you may have been, it
So
may have
it's
been a
not inoperable.
jalopy,
That's
but
it.
you drove
But
it.
I think some of
What
the,
is it?
the pictures that I put through is like, if you've got licenses, or that expired tags, and for the sake of, you know, for the first couple pictures that I sent in, those are,
Was that inoperable under C,
It's
number
not.
9, unlicensed vehicle doesn't display a valid registration?
and these
An
things,
expired tag is not is an invalid registration.
I mean, these are not
Right.
under an affordability issue, this is not an affordability issue, these are cars that are just straight out, it's not affordable. It's a junk car.
It's a junk car.
It's an expired tag, it's sitting there, it's been sitting there for years. I've witnessed this already, that's why I brought these to our attention, not to mention Shaddix, of course, what we're gonna talk about later. That's always the next step that's gonna come into this, is we've got the same kind of scenario on a private property, wide open, nothing's moving, nothing's happening. What are we gonna do? And where do we stand on that?
Under the definitions, junk vehicle is inoperable. So your one that you have.
Inoperable is one of
Still-
the definitions, though.
Only
Yeah.
one definition.
But if it's still working and you're driving it around, that would not be a junk vehicle.
That's correct.
That's correct.
It's a moving vehicle.
Yeah,
It's operable.
so yours would be okay.
But these cars with expired tags or no tags are not moving, they're not moving anywhere, and they've been sitting there for, over the extended period of time that Denise has spoken of.
Yes, so what I would say is that I would assume that PD would be able to determine the last time a vehicle was registered, i.e. licensed. But in my view, that would be something that they would get to later, because one of the first questions is it operable? And I think that we build in 3 years or older, that becomes a indicia of possible inoperability, because presumably one would take a newer car and make sure that it runs, and probably it does with today's technology.
Is this, I noticed at the bottom of the page for Exhibit A, and I've noticed at a couple other places, that the term public nuisance. Could you define public nuisance for me, please? What makes something a public nuisance?
The simplest answer that I can give you is that the concept of a public nuisance is something that is either an eyesore, it has the potential to injure or damage others, and that after a period of time, if it's a public nuisance, the law recognizes the rights of the municipality, because of public health, safety, and welfare in a general sense, to take actions to interfere with a private property owner's rights. Okay? Years ago, I represented a municipality, and we obtained an injunction to close a bar down because there were shootings, we had evidence of drug sales, and it was a public nuisance. So, I mean, an example, if somebody had a bunch of old refrigerators in their front yard and they hadn't taken the doors off, but even if they'd taken the doors off, it's still, at some point, and again, at some points enough is enough. We've got these time frames in here to give guidance and to empower our zoning and PD, but historically, you're not out there on day 8 saying, get rid of the car. Because you need to do some further investigation to find out what the reasons are. But in some instances, because you've all lived here for so long, you know. And again, you hope that somebody follows the law, and if not, then they're going to be coerced to do it.
Could you consider public nuisance for cars, for automobiles, let's say, runoff, we know we're getting rain on it, we know it's seeping, we know it's going into the groundwater, does that consider?
That would seem to be a public health.
Public health,
proceeding.
yeah.
Right?
yeah.
I think one of the things I'm
the
concerned
rubber.
about is the distinction between public health and safety
And
and
the nuisance.
aesthetics.
Okay,
Right. Yeah.
I
Two
mean, do
separate-
we want to get rid of it just because I don't like the look of it?
right.
You know, as
That's
opposed to-
a legitimate factor,
Right.
though. I mean,
Yeah.
the
Well, I understand.
community, you can legislate on that.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
That we don't like the looks of it, we have to legislate?
Well,
Well, that can be
That
legislated.
seems like a judgment call.
well, it is, because, when you look at the aesthetics of your community, do you want a bunch of junk cars in your historical district where people are maintaining their homes, and it's no different than somebody who's not getting rid of their weeds and their yard
Right.
looks awful. It's a community value, which is by definition somewhat, not entirely, but somewhat subjective.
Yeah, the other thing that struck me while I was reading it was the change of the language of permitting one junk vehicle to no junk vehicles at all. You know, that previously we would allow one.
In the police code, in the general offenses code, we
Yeah,
allow
that's where
one.
it conflicts, yeah.
Yeah, and in the zoning code, which was updated in 2013, there was no study of the entire codified ordinances, so that's where we found sometimes these discrepancies. And in the zoning code, you can have none.
And just to clarify, I mean, I believe it's implicit, but private property could be residential or business.
Chris?
Yes?
Yes.
And how does this compare to, like, who owns the land and who owns the
That's a great question.
property? It's the same thing as the lease.
It's a blend of both, the distinction being vehicles are titled individually, independently of real estate.
Got it.
So there could be circumstances where a tenant who has a vehicle, I mean, again, it depends, is there a license plate on it? I mean, we have to take it on a case-by-case basis, but ultimately, if the property owner is responsible for what occurs on his or her property.
And would it revert to the last registered owner if, like, let's say, for example, something's been, inoperable junk sitting on a lot for a long period of time, it's not registered? You do revert to the last registered owner, or?
Well, you're getting then into issues that relate to abandonment of property. And that has like public nuisance, that has a whole nother set of permeations to it. That fact sensitive, but if somebody, let's take an example. Landlord owns property, there is a junk vehicle, and you contact the property owner, and you say, junk vehicle. Landlord says, well, that was from 3 tenants ago. That's not my property. That could arguably be deemed, I would say that's abandoned property. And then we would get somebody to tow it and get it off of there. Now, I'd want to document what the property owner said about that, and I'd want PD to tell me what they could tell me about the ownership component, because depending on what the vehicle is, we may or may not want to try and give notice to that former or that owner. But again, that's the fact-sensitive part, because you don't want a claim to come back later by a property owner to say, you somehow violated my private property rights. Again, extreme
And
examples.
it can get pretty complicated, even, you can have junk vehicles that they can't even find a title on. Well, if we then take that property, we can't take it and have it crushed until we come up with, so there's some sort of procedure for applying for some title that you might even be more aware of that.
There is a statute that allows for abandoned vehicles to
Abandoned
people to
vehicle,
get
yeah.
titles, and AJ's probably.
But
very
yeah,
familiar with
so
that.
like a scenario where you bought land and there were a bunch of abandoned vehicles, it's great because you can call the sheriff and the sheriff takes care of all of it, but this is a different scenario. But yeah, it's not a salvage title, but an abandoned title or a missing title, no one has a claim to it, and you can crush it after that, but after that process.
But you have to wait for that process to happen.
The sheriffs may still be involved in that, though. It may, possibly. We may be able to avoid it.
Should we include public property? I mean, we have an abandoned vehicle in an alleyway right now.
At that point, if it's in public property, I think that
They were trying to
becomes-
say it's
Did you not
private,
get
but
that
we've
picture?
No,
proved that it's public. So we don't need to worry about that in that case.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, to me, that's a parking issue.
Yeah.
And you have the village has the ability to tow the vehicle, impound it, and then take steps based upon the impound, which at that point, the storage yard, the tow yard, if something isn't picked up, they deal with the abandonment issue and they keep it. That's one of the ways they make money.
And one other question I have on this, and I put in there, a violation of this section shall not be justification for a zoning variance. Should that even be in there? I mean, I just wouldn't want someone to try to say, well, this is my property and trying to come, but I don't think there's any, variances are different. and-
The law does not support the concept of use variance, and to say I want a use variance because I want to keep my abandoned car there is not.
So can we strike that? It probably wouldn't even be necessary to have it in there.
You don't need it, you don't, but if it's in there, it
Doesn't hurt.
it eliminates some creative mind from attempting to argue it.
So
I don't think there's any harm in leaving it in, but you can take it out too.
Let me ask one question. Whatever we clean up tonight and get this going in the right direction, are we starting from square one? Like, for what I brought today, these are gonna start from, let's just say, once this would all be codified and gone through, are we building a case file going from now, or can we go back? Are we looking back at anything and say, this needs to be applied to this car, this car, this car? Or are we just going forward?
Fair question. So the answer is, the facts are the facts. So the facts that existed before the adoption of any new zoning codes are still there. They don't change, they don't go away. The relevance of the facts to a new code may or may not have an impact, but it would seem to me that if somebody was already engaged in conduct that was violating old or new code, that fact remains the same.
Okay.
And I wanted to then point out there that we went back, after talking with Judy, with Chris actually on the phone, taking out, making section E penalty instead of, if we strike section E that's currently in there for that long extension, that instead of saying mayor's court specifically, just say the court. And, because then it gives you the option depending on,
Where you wanna go
yeah,
with it.
where you can send it.
Yep.
We think abandoned cars are a more serious problem than weeds.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, lived in Iowa. Good. Any other questions or concerns? I'm going to open a public hearing. How
Now,
about this?
are we opening the public hearing for just this particular ordinance?
But for.
The subject
ones that we're
matter.
Yes.
Discussing for 660.07.
Okay.
1260.
I haven't talked about one.
Oh, you haven't talked about that? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, then we'll wait till
That's
open
why I'm
public hearing
asking.
till we got them all. Okay,
Okay.
sorry.
That's all right.
All right.
So then in Exhibit B, 1260.03, driveway standards, access easements, parking and storage. Under D, storage and repair of vehicles, striking out number 2. And then this is in the zoning code. Just taking it out of the zoning code completely and making it only in the police code.
Easier.
Yeah,
Yes.
was my suggestion.
Agreed, yeah.
Any
That's,
questions about that? And moving on then to 1272.05, enforcement and penalty. Under D, at the bottom of the page, the matter will be referred to either the municipal prosecutor or we had mayor's court, but do you, I mean, the municipal prosecutor is the county, right? I mean, so,
No.
No, it'd be
Municipal- this is
Xenia.
Xenia prosecutor.
Xenia, Xenia prosecutor, I'm sorry.
Municipal.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
or-
these are misdemeanor offenses.
Okay, or mayor's court,
Yeah.
is that okay for, in this case, to have mayor's court?
Yeah, I mean, the fact
Okay.
is that under any circumstance, unless it's one of the exceptions, there's always discretion to take the case to Xenia or to
Right.
mayor's court. It doesn't frankly need to be in there.
Well, it certainly has been a clearly expressed intention that anything that can go to mayor's court should.
And in here, it was always just the municipal
So
prosecutor.
I'm really glad that you've made that change, just to put a point on that.
Okay, and then that's it for those, okay. And then Exhibit D was just an example of what other communities have done. And no one had extensions, I'm just saying. They never had extensions of,
Right.
after 30 days,
Yeah.
we'll give you 60 more if you just
They
ask.
took care of it.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
okay,
Right.
so now open the public hearing on kind of all of them that we covered, 660.07, 1260.03, and 1272.05. So if you'd like to come up and talk again, try to limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
My name's Mitzi Miller. So it has to be complaint-driven, right?
Most things are.
It's no longer one car, if it's one car, it has to be removed, right? You're not allowed to have one car. Okay, and there's nothing where the police come to that individual and they say this car's been here 6 months, that they can just move the car in their yard somewhere else and start over. There's nothing about 6 months. They have to see, the car has to be in that same position for a certain period of time. No.
I see what you're saying. On public, where they'll mark it in chalk to see
I've
if it's
seen
been
that
there a while.
happen
Yeah, no,
in
it has
years
to be
past.
enclosed or it has to be removed from the property.
Okay, and here's, I'm just gonna throw this out. Two things. What if people can't afford to get rid of the car? They just say, the landowner says, I just can't do it. I don't have the money, the house is in foreclosure or whatever. What happens then? It just goes to mayor's court or? I'm just curious how that would be handled.
Looks like you have an answer there.
Well, I mean, if it was a foreclosure process, and it would be taken care of, I would say, within the year, the property and anything on the property.
Okay.
But that doesn't answer, I simply can't afford to move the vehicle or have it
Yeah.
towed.
Well, but keep in mind that there are many agencies out there that will take any car
Right,
if it's
yeah,
donated.
Salvation Army, Goodwill. Didn't WISO run? Yeah, WISO takes it, yeah.
Okay, and,
Yeah, but do we want to keep it local?
well, that's a running car, though. That's not a non-running car.
They pick anything up.
Organization.
They pick anything up.
Oh, well, okay.
It's like the push-pull drag.
The only
it
other
in.
thing I have, and I'm just going to bring this up, so what happens if somebody just puts a tarp over their car, covers it up, or you've seen the structures where it's just aluminum and they have just a cover on it? That would be garaged? Either one of those?
I mean, what
Does that fit the definition of
Right,
an
well, I'm just
enclosed?
asking you.
Asking what constitutes.
Yeah, what constitutes,
Well, it
What would they
says
have
in
to get a
here,
variance for that?
It has to be a garage or suitable permanent structure.
permanent structure?
Permanent structure,
Okay,
it's in
good.
there.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Right, but if they're going to put one of those up, they'd have to come here anyway,
Yes, would you like to-
hypothetically.
Yes, well,
You need,
I'm
Come up
sorry,
here.
because of the mic.
can you bring the mic to her, please? Yeah, we have to have you on mic so that they can hear you on television.
Thank you. I've been fighting this for 40 years. It's the same old story in 40 years. I want to know who is going to be the enforcer. If the person next door to me has 40 cars in his yard, I call every day to the police department to get one towed. Why can't we have police official, employee of the village, why can't they be reported? The police are around town all the time. They see them time after time. Can they not do anything about it? If you're going to pass laws, you've got to have an enforcer. And without an enforcer, might as well go another 10 years or so. I would think that Yellow Springs thinks more of the town and the looks of the town, that finally they'd do something about it.
I'd like to comment, it's my impression that this does exactly that. It sets up our Yellow Springs Police Department to be more successful at being able to enforce this. So the way I read this, that's
Yes.
exactly to your point of why we're doing this.
And eliminating the conflict between the two
Right.
pieces of law.
And I think when you talk about complaint-driven, it just doesn't mean village government and then residents. I mean, when complaint-driven sometimes is a staff member that walks in and says, hey, there's it's difficult to see because of the weeds at this corner and blah, 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 can you send a notice? Okay, so complaint-driven is also can come from staff. So if that was what you're saying too.
there anybody else that would like to comment on this? Okay, thank you very much for talking. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on that then. Any additional thoughts? I was thinking while we were going through it, as far as potentially voting, to vote separately on the 1260.03 and 1272.05, separate those out from the 660.07.
Yeah, they're two
separate
different
votes. They're
sections,
two
yeah.
very different things, yeah.
Okay, it's maybe splitting hairs, but I feel more comfortable, since one's criminal code and the other one's zoning code, that you do each of them separately. in
No,
any
all
case.
three of them separately?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine with everybody?
Whatever makes it clean.
Fine?
Yeah.
So then would you need a motion first for the amendment to section 660.07? I make that motion.
Second.
Right. It's been moved and seconded that we accept the proposed changes to 660.07. Well, would you call the roll, please?
I will. Stiles.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Palata.
Yes.
Doden.
No.
Okay.
So now we'll move on to 1260.03, which I believe that is the Exhibit B. This is the taking the language out of the zoning code, right? Right.
Well, I move approval of the text amendment for section 1260.03D.
I'll second it. Would you call the roll on that, please?
Yes. Palata.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Stiles.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes.
And for clarification for the next one, which is also in the zoning code, obviously, we're not going to have this particular situation in the zoning code anymore. But this 1272.05 also deals with other matters within the zoning code, which is now allowing those issues to come to the prosecutor or the mayor's court. Just want to clarify that.
I move for the amendment of zoning section 1272.05.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Would you clerk call the roll, please?
Yes. Krieger.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Palata.
Yes.
Stiles.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Does this have to go through council now or anything, or is this, are we?
Oh,
It
yeah.
doesn't
Oh,
go
yeah.
through council, we gotta go through, we gotta get that cleared. So we got the ball rolling.
Okay, that gets us through all the public hearings.
Yep.
So we're on to any old business. There's nothing listed here.
I just wanted to briefly just mention that it's actually under agenda planning update. Let me just wait till we get to agenda planning,
Sure.
honestly.
New business. Okay. So we just move on to agenda planning then.
Yes. Agenda planning for November 12th. We're going to have the homing preliminary PUD for the 54-unit senior housing project. That's going to take quite a bit of time.
And to that end, one of the things, having gone through a couple of PUDs, and my very first meeting as chair was doing one of the damn things, I'm going to try to come up with a kind of voting worksheet for us that will at least sort of boil things down, maybe
Sure.
so we can see it all on a
nice
single
idea.
page,
Great.
even though we have to maybe
Thank you,
refer
yes.
to lots of pages.
Sounds
in the
good.
code,
Okay,
but
that's good.
to simplify and clarify the process a
Great.
little bit, so.
Because, the PUD code really needs to be looked at and revised, but we have so many other text amendments right now. It's just something to look at in the future. Okay, and then the Yellow Springs Brewery has their private party, which back in December of 2017, Planning Commission approved, which is the south of town.
Yes.
And they did not come, the same thing as Fire Station. They didn't come forward with a extension of time. And we're just simply doing a reapproval of that. So probably have them go before the homemade preliminary PUD. And then, and they've actually scaled that back quite a bit. So there's not going to be some of the other things that they had in there that was an issue for neighbors prior. And then update regarding subdivision regulations. I want to put that, it's either December or January. I met with Choice One, and we had a good discussion about it. They've gotten some of the stormwater information in. They're going to try to come up with some sort of a chart a table that can be used to formulate within certain sizes. I told them our maximum for accessory dwellings is 800 square feet. They might go up to 1,000 as a way to make it affordable. We talked about that for people who rather than making them have to have an engineering, they might be able to calculate that stormwater method themselves. This is going to take a little bit more time. So I'm probably not going to be meeting with them again until the first week in December, which means either they'll probably come at our meeting in January and make a presentation about it. And we'll just change the subdivision regulations after that. And we're just got to push solar rights to another meeting. This, again, I know was something that council had requested, but it really has to do with new developments. And we don't have anything pressing at this moment. And the other sandwich board signs, that's future too. We just have so much else going on. We are going to also have one transit guest lodging application.
In November?
Yep. I'd already pushed him off from
What's the address?
October's meeting to November.
Okay, anything else?
Well, I have a
Nope,
question
okay.
for you. I mean, is there any appetite for starting that meeting at 6 o'clock?
Yes,
Absolutely.
I'm fine with that.
Which one? November?
November, I mean,
every
you're
meeting.
looking at a 3
We're
or
going
4
to
hour
meet at
meeting.
6 o'clock, you said?
Yes.
That
She's
becomes,
asking if you'd want to because of,
that can end up being very tight for me coming back from Columbus. I mean, assuming there's no traffic problems, starting at 6 is no problem. But with all the construction between here and where I work,
Tuesday what?
sometimes
about
it takes me 2
6:30?
hours to get.
Are we on the third Tuesday now?
6:30
Yeah.
would probably be
12.
safer.
Which is the second Tuesday?
Second Tuesday, it's the 12th.
We're talking about 6:30 instead of 6?
Unless you're willing to risk it and then start it at 6, and I might not be able to be here at the beginning.
Well, I mean, normally the first 15 minutes is minutes and,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I
and
mean,
we're
we
putting-
could shoot for that.
and Susan could cover until you get here because we're doing the PUD at the end.
And you're doing the brewery and all that first. so-
Yeah.
So that's fine. Make sure I have your phone number.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I make a
November
motion for
is
Like it's done.
6 o'clock.
yep.
I make a motion.
All right. Are we ready to adjourn? Somebody like to move to adjourn?
Adjourn.
I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Me? Thank you. All right. Thank you very much for coming. Your comments, please.